So we're going to move on from our kind of strength and muscular endurance and power training to look at the concept of developing aerobic endurance. And we've already sort of defined this concept as the ability to transport and use oxygen efficiently in the body. Okay, so we're interested here, excuse me, apologies, in how we go about training that. And my first example of a training methodology is really the classic in this context is continuous training. So let's address the main constructs within a continuous training. Again, acknowledging that it's important that you guys experience this, not just sort of listen to me bang on about it. Okay, so first of all, we're talking about a minimum of 20-minute session. Okay, so if a continuous training session is going to be continuous, by definition, it needs to be 20 minutes or more of continuous activity. Okay, so that's kind of a preset and a default, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on. Secondly, it's what I would refer to as a steady state exercise, steady state. So what do we mean by this? Two things, in my opinion. The first one is it's what we call a steady pace. So whether we are running, swimming, cycling, it is a steady pace, and that steady pace should be maintained at something that would be described as moderate intensity. So this is not a sprint, this is not pushing maximally, this is about getting to a pace and a state which is sustainable and that you can keep going easily. Not easy, actually, I'm going to take that back. I don't mean easily. Perhaps more comfortably, depending on the level of fitness that one has. And we can see that, right? We can kind of see that these guys, they should be able to keep going at the pace. In fact, I think this is somewhat of a stage photo. They don't seem very sweaty here, but they should be able to keep going for a significant period of time, at least 20 minutes at the pace that they're running at. Likewise, this athlete should be able to go down and loop back almost relentlessly without fatiguing in this kind of continuous training model within the pool. But I also want to say here is that we need to be specific about intensity. I would suggest that we should be thinking about 60 to 85%. And I want you to think about what's going to come next. 60 to 85% of what? Well, in previous sessions, we've talked about intensity and heart rate being closely matched. So we're talking about 60 to 85% of max heart rate. And we've already looked at how we calculate that. So I'll refer you back to those concepts. So, as we've seen previously, we can calculate training zones, right? So let me just mention that we've already done that. So I'm not going to go into the training zones calculation again in this session, but of course we have looked at that already, and I encourage you to go back to that session if you haven't already done so and have a look at it. We've said already we're looking at developing aerobic endurance. Okay, so we can use other terms: aerobic fitness, cardiovascular fitness. Sometimes we'll talk about VO2 max. And the other point I would like to make to you guys is that this is extremely popular, is one of the most popular sporting and recreational activities in the UK, in fact in the world. So it's an extremely popular going for a run, going for a jog. We're talking about continuous training if it fulfills the criteria that we've set out here. A couple of strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so look, strengths are that it's easy. You can do this almost at the drop of a hat, right? It's very accessible. Secondly, it's cheap. Need a pair of trainers? Not much else, really. Okay, it can get expensive if you're into very technical clothing and the best shoes and the best GPS track. Of course, you can spend money on it if you want to, but you don't need to. And we also like the fact that we've got this target zones notion. We can be very specific at how we're targeting the correct percentage of maximum heart rate. But we do have some negatives with this model as well, okay? A lot of you will probably already report this because I've heard it many times, is that people find it monotonous. Monotonous is another word for boring. Running for 20 minutes, cycling for 20 minutes, whatever, people find it monotonous. It's often why people use a lot of cross-training in the gym, going on the bike, going on the treadmill, going on the rower, for example. Other things is it sometimes can be argued that it decreases speed of performers. So unless you combine this with, say, plyometrics or some interval training, well, maybe it's going to reduce the speed of the performer, more of its speed training later on. And the other point is that it can be time consuming. And what we mean by this, of course, is that once you're getting into sort of 30-minute sessions, 40-minute sessions, 1-hour runs, say, then of course it does become a time-consuming, and you almost have to plan it into your day, right? Well, it's the same with any training, really. But anyway, I think it's an interesting reflection on life. What is more important than doing these things, which makes it that these things are the time-consuming ones, obviously chores and jobs and study. But it's kind of an interesting one that often it's the exercise, which is the first thing to go. Anyway, just a general observation I might make. I'll be straight back to you when we talk in just a moment's time about fartlek training. Thank you.